but a moment when his war spirals out of control and prices for American families climb higher and higher. Instead of focusing on the nation's needs, as always, he nurses his grievances. As always, he forces the rest of us to help him process his shame. As always, he centers his own fear of the accountability that he will face when we win decisively this fall.
It's difficult to argue with any of that. That's Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff exposing, for one thing, the party of Donald Trump is offering to their voters less than 4 months ahead of the midterms. And maybe that is why the latest findings in the Washington Post are revealing a stark enthusiasm gap between Democratic and Republican voters right now. According to the Post, Democrats are 10 times more likely to be certain to vote this year than Republicans, larger than their 2-point edge in the year 2018. And more than 7 in 10 Democrats say it is, quote, more important to vote in 2026 than in previous midterm elections. That compares with just over half of Republicans. Americans are also much more worried about their finances than they were 8 years ago. This year, 40% of registered voters say they are not as well off as when Donald Trump took office, compared with 13% who said the same thing in November 2018. I want to bring in political analyst, the former Senator Claire McCaskill. Also joining us, Democratic pollster and political analyst Cornell Belcher, and Ben Rhodes is still with us. Cornell, what do you see in these numbers?
It's really interesting. You know, Nicole, we've talked about it before, how, you know, especially off-year elections, they're really about whose base turns out, right? First and foremost, you've got to energize and turn out your base. And when you look at data, not only data in Washington Post, but I'm also picking it up in my data too, we ask it number two, either how motivated are you to vote on the scale of 0 to 10, how enthusiastic you are, which is that Democratic voters are tending to be much more enthusiastic and see the stakes as higher this election year than we've seen in prior years. And Nicole, it's not just this is in the polling. This is when the polling actually matches up with real life, because you'll also notice, Nicole, that if you look at turnout patterns from primaries to special elections this year, you've seen more sporadic Democrats turning out and voting, and more Democrats in primaries this time around than you have seen. And that surge in more Democrats, more sporadic voting Democrats, have helped Democrats outperform previous election analysis in almost every race that you've seen of consequence since 2020.
Claire, you've been tracking this intensity, the intensive emotions for and against Donald Trump and for and against Democrats, I think since about the week after his reelection. Tell me how you see this.
Well, Trump's doing the heavy lifting here. This enthusiasm is really, we can lay it at his feet, because on a real life level, whether it's gas prices or the farmers across this country that are scratching their heads going, what? Wait, our markets are gone. We can't get health care. We can't afford our input costs. They're the ones that are saying they're not so excited about voting now. They were all Republican voters for Donald Trump. Not all of them, but the vast majority of them were. So, all of the policy stuff is lining up against him. But really, Nicole, what's driving a lot of this enthusiasm is the outrageous stuff he does. The stuff that makes you just go, I can't stand this guy. The narcissistic behavior, the hogging the attention from the Spain World Cup winners, the ballroom, the putting his name on stuff, the ridiculous thing on the reflecting pool. For most Americans, they're going, okay, this guy's nuts. This guy is not focusing on leading our country in ways that will help us and make us more secure. And that's the whipped cream and cherry on top of the war and the tariffs and healthcare costs, and then wrapping it up with a big bow of his corruption and graft that his family are becoming multi-billionaires on the backs of the Oval Office. They are all enriching themselves. They are feeding at a trough like pigs have never fed at a trough. So it is really, I think all of that is what's driving the enthusiasm. You know what's keeping me up at night? How do we sustain this to 2028 when Trump is no longer on the ballot? I feel pretty good about the midterms. I worry about 2028 because those 2 years, it's going to be very hard for the Democrats to get a lot done. And I think the voters' expectations are going to be high. But he's still going to be in the White House, and he's still going to have a veto pen, and there's still not going to be 60 votes on the Democratic side. So I'm not as worried about the midterms as I am about 2028.
I mean, Ben, I want to come back to your earlier point. I see the politics the way Cornel and Claire do, but I see the flaws in our democratic system, I think, the way you do. Like, I think that Trump knows that the war in Iran is deeply unpopular. I don't know that anyone tells him, but I think because he was so deeply against wars when he ran in 16, 20, and 24, he actually agrees with the detractors of a forever war, which is what he has entered the country into. But when I watch the brazen theft, the stealing from the American people, letting the boys steal from the American people, letting his sons steal through shady business deals and government contracts, I wonder what you wonder, whether they have a plan to upend free and fair and secure elections.
Yeah, everything he's doing suggests someone who doesn't care about public opinion. I mean, Nicole, announcing essentially an insider trading scheme where hedge funds can buy access to Truth Social Post early so they can make money off of trades on Trump's war. I mean, it's a policy designed in a laboratory to be deconstructed by Jon Ossoff and motivate Democratic voters. Look, Trump's midterm election strategy is not to lower prices, is not to even talk about affordability. Trump told us his midterm election strategy last week. It's to steal the election. It's to say that there's a combination of foreign interference and domestic fraud. He'll try everything he can to disrupt voting itself. So we have to be worried about ICE agents or military even at polling sites based on some trumped up fake threat. We have to worry about ballot boxes being seized before votes can be counted. We have to worry about Donald Trump saying the minute the elections are over that they were stolen. And this time around, he has a Justice Department led by Todd Blanche and Kash Patel, people who will go along with that and echo whatever he says. He's got compliant people. He's got a guy that's in line to be the director of national intelligence who won't even say that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. This is happening before our eyes. This is not a conspiracy theory. He gave a primetime address last week telling us that his midterm election strategy is to steal the midterm elections, not to contest them and win them for Republicans. And so I think, number one, we have to be calling that out and telling people what to expect so that they see it before it happens. Number two, we have to fortify state elections, right? The elections are still run by the states in this country, not the federal government. And we're going to need to be driving that principle home. Number three, I hope the Democrats win by a decisive enough margin that it just looks ridiculous and absurd for him to be contesting this at all. That matters, Nicole. If this is a 10, 20 vote majority for the Democrats in the House, that's one thing compared to 2 or 3 late returns coming in from California while Trump is trying to do this.
Right.
But make no mistake, the crisis in our elections is not 2028. It's going to be in 2026. And he's told us that. And we have to be ready for it and have strategies to deal with it.